Ferrari is bringing an extensive package upgrade to Imola, and before that the Maranello team tested their full package in Fiorano, which seemed to be a great success for the team. If their original beliefs are about to become reality, then we're going to see a very competitive SF-24 in one of their two home races. But with Red Bull bringing upgrades of their own, as well as McLaren stealing the spotlight with two upgraded cars, could we be in for a great race that Ferrari would win in front of their home crowd? It's safe to assume that the entire F1 world will be keeping a close eye on Ferrari's upgrades in Imola, and what is even more important is that the team itself understood the assignment they have, which is why they conducted a 100-kilometre test for both of their drivers in Fiorano in order to see where the upgrades would bring the car. Although this was dubbed to be illegal by many F1 experts, or in the minimal hand a loophole that Ferrari has managed to extract, the process was monitored by an FIA representative, and the 200 kilometres in total that both drivers ran through Fiorano also involved a test of the mud flaps on the wheels, which seems to be a long shot of an upgrade for the sport in the foreseeable future. The feedback that came from both drivers was quite optimistic, and the big steps forward with these upgrades compared to the SF-23 were noticeable from the very first lap of the Fiorano test. This was one of the greatest obstacles that Ferrari had in the past. They were unable to extract a great deal of performance from the upgrades because of the lack of understanding they had compared to Red Bull or even McLaren, with the Woking-based squad turning their fortunes around in the first wave of upgrades in 2023 and now presenting a real threat for the P2 and even the P1 seats in both championships. This time, however, the luck seems to have been smiling towards the Maranello team, mostly because Fiorano is a track where Ferrari can test a lot of things that they need to see whether are enough or not for dethroning Red Bull's dominance with Verstappen. But what is also worth noting is that they can only collect a limited amount of data, which is why Vasseur tried to keep expectations low, especially due to the heating of the tyres that we'll talk about a bit later in the video. Regardless, Ferrari have concluded a very important thing from their upgrades: the correlation that they had in the simulator as well as the plans they had for the cars worked. This means that the planned 0.3 per second that the car was expected to deliver would very likely turn into reality. And even though Red Bull are quite optimistic about the second part of their own upgrades, this is very likely to be the bigger talking story of the Imola GP. The testing, however, provided some bad information regarding the heating of the tyres, which was to be expected given the fact that the setup of the car is yet to be optimised, and given Ferrari's masterclass in Japan, one of the most tyre demanding tracks on the calendar, it's safe to assume that this would not be a big issue to tackle. The effectiveness of the package, however, would have to wait until Imola is fully tested, because although the speed is there, we've seen many times that despite the raw performance of the car, there are lots of other factors that we should be looking at in terms of competing for race wins, such as the setup of the cars and the performance of the drivers as well. This is where Verstappen is in a league of his own, and if you compare his results to those of Perez, you'll note that there is a massive difference that comes mostly from his ability to extract the maximum potential out of the car. This is why Vasseur has been very critical about the setup of the car and the minimal steps that the team needs to take in the right direction. Elaborating on this matter, Vasseur said, "I'm sure that in Imola we will have a better race by putting everything together. We know that many have brought updates to these races, but we finished ahead. We are at the points of development of the car where if you bring something, it's not a matter of seconds but of tenths. Without a doubt, we will be able to fight for victory in Imola, but I believe there is a gap that varies from track to track and from compound to compound, which makes more of a difference than an update. We must focus on the job, which is making the most of what we have. The update that we will bring to Imola will certainly help, but it doesn't all depend on that. It depends on the work that we will do on the track." And it goes without saying that Ferrari has a lot of plans for the remainder of the season, mostly because they established themselves as the second fastest team on the grid without any upgrade packages introduced to the car. Based on a couple of setup changes, the Maranello team has kept up high hopes for their fans, and now with the first upgrade package in Imola, both Leclerc and Sainz stated high hopes that they will be able to wipe out the advantage that Red Bull has gained in the first couple of races in the season. The package itself is quite extensive. If you look at it, the new belly entrances, an entirely new floor, as well as side pod inlets combined with the elimination of the bypass duct go to show that the team is truly introducing an evolved version of their car. The new floor of the car will enable them to extract as much performance as possible through the current regulation era, but what Ferrari has struggled with a lot in the past was the tyre management, as well as keeping up the pace throughout the entire race, which is something that they've made a great step towards thanks to the great understanding they've been able to obtain from the stable platform that the SF-24 provided itself to be. And what seems to be a big plus for Ferrari is that both of their drivers are quite competitive, which could come as a negative thing if they're not able to contain their emotions and fight for a better position on the track. Definitely Sainz does not have anything to lose and will try to put a lot of pressure on Leclerc due to his future hanging in the air beyond Ferrari's tenure that is ending in 2024. But after all, the Monegasque driver does seem to be the more collected and compacted driver when the car is at its optimum, which has been proven in the past couple of races. All in all, the competition will become very interesting because 0.3 per second is not a small amount of performance, because right now if Red Bull's upgrades do not tend to bring the pace that they expect them to, it would effectively mean that Ferrari would be the fastest team on the grid, with McLaren also posing a great threat to the championship fight. Although this would be a really good scenario for us to watch, the comments coming from Red Bull are quite positive, and when talking about the upgrades that would be implemented on the RB20 in Imola, which are the second part after the process started in Suzuka, Helmut Marko added, "I'm not worried about McLaren being a threat in the championship. Norris is more than 50 points behind. Besides, we are bringing an upgrade to Imola, which I expect a lot from." There is, however, one comment that Adrian Newey has added about the RB20, which does give us a bit of something to think about in terms of having a competitive season in 2024. Elaborating on the RB20 and whether or not there is something that he would change on the car, the British mastermind from Red Bull in departure went on to say, "There is always room for improvement. The car is the third evolution of the 2022 car under this rule set. We've got one more year next year until the huge change in 2026. We are always searching for little bits and pieces. The fundamental architecture of the car stays the same. For instance, there is one feature on the car that I'm not terribly happy with this year. It's something that will either change this year or be altered next year." But with McLaren also coming with two fully upgraded cars in Imola, it would be very interesting to see whether we will have a proper six-man fight for the race win, even though the narrative remains the same. The Dutchman is the favourite and the one that has to be dethroned, and unless the Red Bull upgrades do not give them enough performance as expected, it would very well mean the beginning of the end of the 2024 championship. With this in mind, do you think that Ferrari's upgrades will turn out to be a true game changer for the remainder of 2024? And more importantly, do you think they will be enough to dethrone Red Bull? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.